Now that you've completed a basic lesson plan, it's time to make sure that lesson plan is really supporting the development of our students. So in this assignment, you're going to be asked to describe and defend a teaching strategy that's in your current lesson plan that does support your students' brain development. So in step 1, you're going to find that teaching strategy and describe it. If you find that you don't have a teaching strategy in your lesson plan, or it's not specific enough, or it's lacking in details, then this is a wonderful opportunity to create and expand and adapt your instructions and make it better on your way to the greatest lesson plan ever. Excuse me. So for example, in the example that we had for our standards-based lesson plan in the previous assignment, step number 2 in the warm-up activity, the author believes supports the brain development. Teacher then asks the students to think about the best beach in Hawaii, spend a few minutes describing it, and then using their 5 senses. This author believes that that's going to support the students' development. The challenging part is to defend why that is true, and this is where our text resources, the class of educational psychology, comes to. You have some things to think about and to answer as a way to help defend your strategy. So if you have another approach to doing that, you're welcome to use it, but this is a way to get your thinking started. How does that strategy that's specific for your kid's brain match the brain development stage of your students? Does the brain have different stages? How does it help make new synaptic connections? How does it support something called brain pruning in your students? How does it involve experience expectant or experience dependent experiences? How does it support the development of cerebral cortex, lateralization, and plasticity? Wow, that's some pretty heavy stuff, but it is something that the DOE would like you to understand in its Principles of Learning and Teaching certification test that you'll take when you try to become a teacher. So all of these are very important for you to understand. The way you get the answers is use the following resources, and you're welcome to use other resources in the internet as long as you provide valid citations. So go ahead and read these 3 pages, The Brain and Cognitive Development. Read page 82, read page 235, read some of these other web sources, read about brain-based education, and see if you can come up with a defense that says why we should do this. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you write this paragraph, I'm really looking for your integration of what you read with your defense. If it remains just your opinion, that's not going to be deep enough or well-researched enough to explain it. So that means that you would have to rewrite it again. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. So if we look at the answer, this person believes that because we are using something that students are familiar with, we're integrating old brain cells with the new brain cells and making connections. That memory in our brain only works if we have something to connect it to. It also means that we should have something called experience-dependent synapses and make new lessons by using the 5 senses in our writing, and so on. So you want to stick to just 1 or 2 ideas and go in depth. If you give me a lot of reasons that aren't in depth, you will not reach the higher quality of the rubric in terms of depth of answer. Now, you can present your answers for 1 and 2 electronically, but you can do it in any multimedia way that you want. So if you want to do a video, images, podcast, to defend that teaching strategy and you're sick of writing, please go ahead and do that. Everything is valid as long as it communicates and supports your answer. Okay? So for example, if you can defend the brain strategy by using a series of brain images that you found on the internet and showed one becoming more active when students start their learning process with prior knowledge, that's a much better visual way than the writing would be. Or found a short video from a famous neurologist who discusses why the learning process works better, and so on. After you complete this answer for step 1 and 2, place it at the end of your lesson plan after your instructions of guiding the learning to view. And let's look at a student example real quick to see where that's put. So wait for that sucker to come up. There we go. And you'll notice you are building the greatest lesson plan ever. So you have the parts that you worked on before, and if you scroll all the way down, we have a part on teaching strategies for the development, and there's our teaching strategy, and this is why it works. So we end up using all this information to be very specific in building up our lesson in a very specific way. And again, this is what you'll be asked to do many, many times as a teacher. So after you complete that, move on to the next developmental strategy. Thanks.